Poem number 15. Francisco has always worked the apple orchards and melon fields. He is who others call illegal alien or undocumented. His father's fathers crossed the borders centuries before Columbus was born, when borders were mythic lands of different animals and plants, when cold water and storm channels was a water god, fins flashing. And now Francisco smells the air, knows when to head north. God calls. He'll sleep with his clothes on, so his children can sleep under the one warm blanket. Like a blazing meteorite that rages into the Earth's atmosphere, he passes La Frontera. Vaporizing pride and language, he becomes a dark mineral rock that cools down as he crosses the border. By El Paso, children and teenagers jump a culvert, going through a hole in the cyclone fence. Tiptoe over beer cans, bed springs, tires, and drink the green water bubbling chemicals out of an industrial outpouring pipe. They swim in the polluted foam. And as Francisco's fingers numb picking apples, he remembers how he too drank from a spout once and became sick. How he worked away weeks of sickness by sweating, working harder and sweating until he had sweated it out. It was the cure for everything. Work. Poem number 16. Now as people enter churches, and plenty are in town, that is the national headquarters for more than 30 reborn, frenzy-eyed religious battalions, armed with the moral convictions that they, and only they, are divinely blessed by God to dole out the rights and the wrongs of human behaviors. Something happened to me when I could no longer support my family. When the bills continued at faster and faster pace to accumulate. When the rest of the world awoke on a Sunday morning like this and went to church in nice, fresh clothes. When they later met at a restaurant brimming with chattering, successful types. Something happened to me when I was forced to raid cornfields only 2 weeks before I was offered this endowed chair. When my boys and I filled paper grocery bags with corn and we ate corn for days, morning, noon, and night. When I had to avoid the phone because collection agencies were hounding me every hour on the hour. When they cut off the lights and the gas. Something happened to me when I walked into the Colorado State Prison and realized that nothing's changed in 15 years. When I was in Phoenix to read and the news announced a man in prison was going to be fried in the chair. When a reporter came up and said, "Is it true that people are prone to crime?" And I knew what he meant. And I ignored him. But something happened to me when I realized some professors were so inclined to demand students not think authentic and original thoughts, that they were to outlaw any emotions in their discussion of books, censure the meaningful stuff of their lives, how their mothers were dying from the inability to express rage, and how their fathers floated lifelessly to and from work in a zombied daze, that class papers were to be written as feckless ticker tape. And meanwhile, something happened to me when the great poet died in a hospital after being raped in prison. Living in the streets and being addicted, when a Chicano named JB from Denver just the other day was pulled from his Denver public school bus by police and kicked and beat with flashlights in clubs, and 60 children watched from the bus windows. The same JB who had the honor of going through the Sundance ritual 9 times and who was considered the bravest of the participants, whose flesh tore and body drooled under the intense agony of his prayer blessings. Something happened to me along the way when I was asked by America to write poetry that pleased the most selfish and arrogantly wealthy. And when I recited poetry roaring with contemptuous spite, upon those who purchased justice and apathetic leisure. And I was shunned by the academics and scratched off foundation lists as someone who would receive no money from them because I spat in disgust and flicked my hand at their pretentious Armani suits, their flesh and bones no more human than the face and hands of an ordinary bedroom alarm clock. Something happened to me when their money meant nothing. When good, clean, young men and women, out of unbearable despair and suffocating anxiety, became addicts or drunks. When mothers were afraid to leave the county jail because life was better inside. When doctors and lawyers and school administrators refused medical and quality education and justice because a person had no money. The ultimate foul and toxic rationale that contaminates our society, the degradation of human beings, stand for that we won't do what is decent and right because that person has no money. Something happened to me then. When I walked into a school in the barrio and the kids were reading history books about how one day we'd land on the moon. 15 years after we landed on the moon. And how there was not a single computer for the whole school when the uptown kids had dozens because of money. And something happened to me along the way when, for my entire life, newscast reports the news of ongoing wars between blacks and whites, Jews and Arabs, when Furmans and Mansons and Nixons and Bushes and LAPDs and the New Mexico police hit squads keep killing and maiming and beating and bludgeoning and raping and hating. Something happened to me when good water turned to poison from industrial waste, when children were born retarded and deformed by corporate pollutants, when the most heinous of crimes by white-collar executives and companies were dealt with by a gentleman's handshake and a fine equal to a lunch counter charge. Something happened to me when my friend Emiliano, who was a gay priest in San Francisco, so afraid of admitting it, he swam out to sea and never returned. When I walked with little black children in Camden, New Jersey, past block after block infested with boarded up houses and street curbs buzzing with crack dealers, everybody fiending. When the school was surrounded with barbed wire and cameras and security patrols, when I visited the Camden prison and men of all colors wept and embraced, when they realized what they had done to themselves, how they had believed the lie that they were no good, how they had let opportunity slip by, when they realized how terribly sad their lives were. Something happened to me when thieves plundered Pablo Neruda's house after his death, when Cheyenne Segoya, the great Chicano educational activist, was assassinated for teaching George Jackson in San Quentin barbershop about subversion and organization, when the movie Malcolm X dismissed the importance of the Puerto Ricans in prison who, being so religious themselves, threw their power and allied with the Muslims against the whites, allowing them to meet in the yard and teach people about spirituality, and they created Malcolm X. Something happened to me when poets who have nothing to write about are being published, trumpeting a new movement, when it's just another mask to obscure their spiritual poverty. Something happened to me when Cisneros and Peña from the Clinton administration went to South Central and groomed themselves for sound bites and photo sessions by appearing in the rubble and promising to help. When 3 days later in the park nearby, thousands of Raza families still had not been even given emergency rations, not so much as a glass of water. When a black congressman and a black congresswoman from South Central rallied congressional support and international sympathy for the blacks in South Central District, rejecting thousands of Latinos in the district as foreigners and excusing the brutal atrocities against them. As black vigilante gangs clubbed and beat innocent families and warehoused thousands of others without so much as even an apology. Something happened to me. Don't you ever ask why I do what I do and write what I write. I just do it.